So welcome to this paint along. This session is all about just practicing some techniques, enjoying yourself, spending a little bit of chill time with your watercolours and hopefully producing something you're proud of at the end of it. It's not going to be a really long session. It is all just about enjoying your time. So today I have some coloured chalk, which is to get my picture onto my paper. I am using Langton. This is cold pressed knot, £140 300 GSM. Any paper like this will do. I have my photograph here, and to get the photograph and the colours and the line drawing, then head over to the link on my website that's in the description below, and it will take you to get the line drawing. So this is the line drawing we're working from, this is the photo, and these are the colours that I mixed up the other day. There is a YouTube video on it, to be able to create this painting with just these 5 colours. So these are the colours over here on my palette, and I'm working with what I call or what people generally call is a mixed, a split primary palette. So 2 yellows, 2 blues, and these are warm and cool colours, a warm and a yellow blue, a warm and a yellow, a warm and a cool yellow, and a warm and a cool red. And to that I've added burnt umber and burnt sienna. And I will only be using 5 of that set. Actually, I've got Van Dyke here, but I've got burnt umber on my palette, so but it should give us very similar outcomes. So the first thing we're going to do, and I find this is the easiest way to transfer my image, is with this line drawing onto this paper, which is taped to a board. You turn the line drawing over. Now you can trace it, but this works, I think, actually a little bit easier. And I'm just going to chalk. You can use soft pastels as well. Make sure it's not a colour that's going to interfere with the paints that you're putting on afterwards. But boats are notoriously hard to draw, so let's make life a little bit easier for ourselves. Then you can just lay this the right way round on your paper and go over it with biro, and it should all transfer very nicely onto your paper. Try not to press too hard, because you don't want the paper to be indented with your biro marks. You can go over with pencil once it's transferred, just to give yourself some more outlines to work to. I have put in some of the key shapes down here, because they are so particular on boats. If you get them wrong, it puts everything out. So there we are, just some key shapes there. Now I'm not going to mask out. You can mask this boat out with some masking fluid, but I'm not going to. I might regret that, but we'll see. You want to be careful not to press too hard down on the areas that are chalked, because you'll just get a big splodge. So try and keep your pressure, keep your paper held down, but keep your fingers away from this area where you've already got chalk. We don't need to put any of the background in drawn, we can do all that with paint afterwards, but I'm keen to make sure that my planking is kind of in the right place And you could draw this, but it's much harder. So now I'm just going to use a pencil, which wasn't on my list, but a pencil to go over my lines, just so that I don't lose them all when if I start rubbing or painting. You don't want them hard, you don't want them too hard, because they will show through your watercolour. And you don't have to do this bit. But for me, it just makes it a little bit more accurate. And this is quite a light pencil. Now what I didn't say is I also have 2 pots of water. One for cleaning my brush and one that will stay with clean water in it for dipping into before I put my brush into another colour, so I don't muddy all of my colours. So because this boat is quite bright in colour, these pencil lines will get covered. If it was white, I probably wouldn't be putting the pencil lines on because they would show through. But you can always gently lift them out with a putty rubber before painting. And with a putty rubber, you don't actually rub, you just roll it across the paper and it will pick up the pencil marks. Gently lift them so you can have a very, very fine pencil line there that barely shows. Right, and I think that is probably all I need at this stage. Super. So we're going to start by mixing up some colours, and I'm going to start with my big wash brush. So I'm not going to worry about any of the dark yet. What I want to do is do my lightest colours. So I'm going to skip the boat. I am going to paint over the reflection, but I want this very, very pale blue. So the way we get our colours pale in watercolour is we just don't use much pigment. So I'm going into my phthalo blue, and that's going to be sort of my lightest wash. And I'm basically going, I need to mix up quite a bit. I need to work quickly because it's very, very warm here and it will dry very, very quickly. And I want a fairly even wash. So I've got a lot, and this is why it's important that you have decent watercolour brushes. I've got a lot of water in my brush, which allows me, I've got my picture at a slight angle, so it allows me to bring this water down on the page, keeping that bead moving. So there should always be some water at the bottom. Might need some more. And you have to work so fast, because if your water starts drying out, you can't then go back in and paint over it because you'll get run back. So this just needs to keep moving all the way down until you get to the bottom. And that should give you a really nice, soft, very light wash. If you have any areas of water, and I don't think I have because it dries so quickly, you can just go along the bottom and pick it up. Now if you're using really good watercolour paper, you will find it will take longer for the paper to dry out. but as I say, it's very, very warm. Now you can see here the paper is buckling a little bit, which is why it's taped down. One way around that is to use a block. So this is a Saunders Waterford block of paper. So it's similar size to what I'm using. And this it's gummed on every side, and then there's a little gap at the top where you can put a credit card or something in, and when you've finished painting you just lift that picture off, but it stops the whole thing from buckling as you go. So I'm actually now going to start, believe it or not, on my boat, and I'm going to start with the blues. So I'm going down to a smaller brush, and I think I'm going to use my very small brush actually. But again, I don't want the colour to be too bright. So I'm looking at some of these areas here. So this is really just, again, a first pass. I'm painting around my yellow rope. I'm going to leave that. And I'm starting over here because I don't really want to get right up next to my wet paint. And that comes down at a slight angle, if you notice. Probably didn't do that quite enough. There we are. And this is the first layer I'm putting on around the top of my boat. So I can go back in and darken it up later. Right. That goes across the back. So you're starting with the lightest colours, and then we're gradually going to make it darker as we go. And I am only here using one blue, and that is my phthalo I'm starting with. I'm going to a slightly bigger brush. And again, I'm just working with this blue. Now my paper has dried. The water has dried, so it's okay to go in. It's not going to run. If you're working in a cooler climate, you might have to leave it a little bit longer to dry. Don't want to scrub too much. As you can see, it's drying already and it's beginning to leave marks. Right, that will do. I'm going to go in with my lightest wash on the wood, and I'm using my burnt sienna and my orange yellow. Okay. Now, can you see how light that wash is in the back now? It's really, really light. So I'm going to go in with another layer. Not all over. I'll leave some sparkles as well. So in order to do that, I'm using my brush on the side. Now you need a round brush to do this. And I've got a couple of ways of creating my green for the next part, and it might be that I mix the green and put it on, but it might be that I just put yellow over this wash. So we'll see. We'll play it by ear. I might try both in some places. Got some darker bits here, then it goes lighter again, and this is all quite dark under here. So you need to make sure you've got enough paint ready. Now into that I'm going to add a little bit of lemon. There we are. Now, let's look at darkening up the area at the back. So I'm sticking with my colours, so I've got my phthalo blue. I'm going to go in with some of my burnt sienna. That is making quite a distinct, very dark green, which is quite a nice colour. Let's try. Yeah, it's not going to be dark enough. It's dark enough for some of this area, so let's bring it down a little bit. That's it, we're beginning to build some of that colour at the top. And I think I'm actually going to pick up a little bit of lemon, a little bit more brown, a little bit more blue, make that even darker up there while it's still a bit wet. There we are. And that can just run for a little bit. A bit more lemon. We've got this beautiful green coming in here. Take it right up to my boat. Across the back. Now I'm leaving some white of the paper for my twigs and leaves and things that are floating, if you can see. This is quite dark down here. I'm not going to try to get it all completely smooth. This goes much yellower again down here. Now we're working onto dry, much more onto dry paper here. I've got some of these shadows and shapes down here. I'll probably go in darker there as well. And this colour I can also bring in here. Some of these. Okay. Right. I'm going to start putting in some of these bits of twig and stuff. So I've got some of my burnt sienna, I'm putting in some of my yellow into that. Gets paler over here. It gets more brown actually, so let's put a little bit of my burnt umber into it. We can make this look a little bit more three-dimensional. And there's some down here. So all I'm trying to do at the moment is just match some of these areas of interest. This can go darker. Okay. Now where this is, that is a really bright orange. So I've got my yellow and my red, and I want it to be really quite bright. So there's this little bit here, and then it's more dilute, it's lighter where it's caught the sun. That's probably still a bit. Check my colour. That's better. Now, what I'm actually going to do is try and lift out a little bit of this to give it that light effect. There. There's quite a subtle shadow in the boat at the back, so I'm going to use still use the phthalo, but I want it to be a little bit more grey, so I'm going to add in some of the brown to it. That's gone a bit too green, so let's try adding in a little bit of the red. I think this is too dark, but it's quite a good colour. Oh yeah, a little bit of shadow colour, and that comes down here. It's really quite subtle, and then there's a white edge along there, and it just goes to the corner really of the boat. Clean water, and I want to soften this edge so that it fades away. So just bring some water back to it. That's it. That's okay. Now, go back in and get some dark brown, because where there is a white ledge here that I want to accentuate. That has run into my shadow. Don't worry, it happens. It happens. Just pick it up. Keep picking it up till it stops running, basically. There we are. It's fine. Now we can go in with some more dark again at the top, and I've got quite a mix of colours on my palette now, but I want it to be really, really dark. So I've got my blue and my yellow are giving me a really nice rich green, and into that I'm going to put a bit of brown, but I'm doing it, not mixing it completely on my palette, it's on my brush. And I'm probably going to have to go in with something even darker. So that's a thicker mix. That's it. So same colours, just there's more pigment than water. That's it, lovely. And I'm also going to put a little bit of this colour across here. Mix it off, going with a bit of this yellow. That's it. Now, can you see where it's light green down here? Here it's very dark, so let's go in with some of this dark green mix again. And I'm going in while it's wet so that it runs. And that's kind of the shadow underneath. Over this side, take some of this green and bring that up so that it runs. That's it. Need a drier brush. There we are, trying to get this brush. I should have used my other round, I think. That's it, I'm trying to get it to skim a little bit across. Okay. Now what we need to accentuate is how much darker this is than the surrounding water. Shadows, reflections tend to reflect darker. So lighter things reflect darker, and darker things actually reflect lighter. That comes up there. We've actually got some orange going on under here. And in here we have this blue. I kind of want that a little bit brighter than that. And I want it to run a little bit. Now I just need to lift out some of that or it will run back and cause a changing my brush, run back and cause a run back. Cauliflower, don't want a cauliflower. Okay. Now, let's go into my boat, and I'm using my ultramarine, which is a much more purple blue. So you can make these colours much brighter. Watercolour doesn't have to be quiet. It can be very punchy. I'm trying to see where the light is on here so that I don't paint over my lighter bits. Steady hand, and I don't think I have one. Okay, we're getting there. I also have a little bit of this reflection down here. Okay. Now we have, this is kind of a bit grey. I think I need a smaller brush, so I'm going for my teeny weeny brush. And some of these grey, it's all still with the same colours, but I want to paint in some of these lines. Looks better. And over this side. So I want to cover up my pencil lines. This is going to go darker, but when I put another wash over, these should still show underneath. Kind of looking a bit how it should. Again, under here, I want these lines to be noticeable when I put the wash on. Now, not perfect, but it'll do. Now I want to put on some of the darker reflections. So same colours, it's much darker here. These are some of the darkest areas. As it comes down here, it gets very much more sort of orangey. Comes into here. Right, now everything needs to go a couple of shades darker, doesn't it? So my blue on my boat goes straight across with the wash. Some of this shadow colour. It can run in here, that's fine. I'll soften that back in, so I'm making this wet. I want the darker area up here. Wow, some of these are much darker. So I'm still going in with, they're quite shallow washes here. They need to look like you can see them. Not sure they're particularly straight, but it is what it is. These would all meet up, and mine don't, so that's all right. Maybe nobody will notice. So this. Okay. How are we doing? Right, so I've got some very bright orange for my rope. Comes in here. And over here, that's going to run if I take it into that wet area, so I have to leave that for a little bit. And I'm going to get some dark brown and quite thick. And it's probably a bit too, what's the word? Brown. I want it to look almost black. That's better. And I want some of this sort of effect to break up so it doesn't all just look one colour. Nobody said this was easy ever. So my paint needs to be quite thick because I want to be able to kind of skim across the paper. Paint round my ball because that actually stands out because of the colours that are behind it. It stands out against that green. Harder than I thought this, but we'll keep going, definitely keep going. Now, under the water here are some shadows, so that requires a very, very, very soft kind of some dark shadows under here. There's some shadows. And what else do we have? Over here we have some very, very dark, almost black, so rather like the colour we used up the top. This is kind of a tree reflection. Across into that, and then it gets a bit more orange. Soften that out a little bit. Again, this is very dark, this part here, and it comes right the way in. Just trying to make my some of this look a bit more three-dimensional. So brighter, thicker paint. Okay. That's looking a bit better. Now my contrast up the back still needs to go darker, doesn't it? So again, I'm going my phthalo and my burnt sienna, and I'm going to put in a bit of my burnt umber with this as well now, and because this is definitely where it's the darkest. It's nearly completely black, and I want that contrast. So I haven't got enough water on my brush there. Let's try again. That's better. That's definitely better. Now some of this also, because this is very, very, very dark down here. Doesn't want to be wishy-washy. Okay, and up here, this is very dark also. So that's the shadow. And again over here, it's a bit greener over here. So let's accentuate this. I'm going to make this wet and put some yellow into it. Like that. This is still wet. I'm going to let that kind of dry into each other. More subtle. Okay, and here it's a bit more yellow again. This is reflecting the light nicely. That goes so dark up there, here. That's got some of that warm colour in it over here. Okay, and I think a little bit of that warmer yellow over here. Just to tie that in a little bit more. It's better. Okay. Get a little bit more of that warmth. It's coming through actually here. And a little bit over here. Little in the water. Oh yeah. Right, I think we can do some brightening up again. So let's go in with our phthalo blue on this bit. Tighten this up. Okay, and my ultramarine. This is much darker along here, I don't know if you can see that. So to make it a darker blue, I'm adding my ultramarine, a tiny little bit of brown into it. Some of that mix I made earlier. Now, I have, and this might not work, but my blue down here has gone a little bit out of kilter. It's not quite the right colour. I have a little bit of white gouache, so I'm going to see if I can kind of resurrect it a bit. So white gouache is opaque. I don't know if this is going to work, we'll see. I think that has helped a bit, and I'm going to put it on here as well. You can always use a little bit of white gouache if we're not being really strict. You can use a little bit of white gouache to get your lights back afterwards if they're not quite as nice as you want them. Okay, that has a little band around it. I don't think I'm going to make too much more of a fuss about this. I have to put in my rope, so I've done part of this. What I'm hoping is that it kind of gets you started. On your experimenting with this sort of thing. So have a play, see what you come up with. Please do share what you create. Come and join me. Come over onto my website. There's lots more going on over there. There's some starter tutorials that you can have a play with as well. And hopefully you will come and join me another time for another little painting session. But yeah, do share what you've done and I will look forward to seeing it. Thank you for joining me. Bye.